Kia ora and good afternoon. The Labour Party caucus met this afternoon and has decided to suspend Gaurav Sharma from our caucus effective immediately. Unfortunately, despite numerous attempts to engage Gaurav, he decided not to attend this afternoon's meeting. I note that he did find the time to talk to media. Caucus has determined suspension is the most appropriate response to the repeated breaches of trust from Gaurav over recent days. This means Gaurav will continue as the Labour MP for Hamilton West and be expected to be present in Parliament. However, he will no longer participate in any caucus events or activities unless caucus's permission is granted. This decision today by caucus was unanimous. The team were very clear that to function as a political party in a place where open debate and dialogue is so key, you need to trust your colleagues. You need to feel you can speak openly and freely. That sense of trust has been broken through repeated breaches of our caucus rules over the last 5 days, and that made the decision very clear. The suspension that was moved by caucus has a time frame. Gaurav's status will be reviewed in December of this year to allow the chance for a return to the caucus if trust with Gaurav is able to be restored. But in making the decision to suspend, caucus were clear that the team retains the right to revisit the decision at any time if the rules continue to be broken. To be clear, the caucus decision was squarely focused on actions over the last few days. What gave rise to those actions also deserves some reflection. A very quick summation of those issues, based on the documents that I have reviewed. Early last year, the Labour Whip's office and Parliamentary Service began working with Gaurav to address concerns raised about his staff management. But before new staff were brought on board, Gaurav was asked to work with a mentor to help remedy issues. Gaurav objected to this intervention. Finally, agreement was reached at the end of last year. Further issues were later raised by additional staff members, including those in his direct employment. This resulted in another pause on hiring and again offers of coaching, mentoring and temporary staff in the meantime. Gaurav again objected to this intervention and the need for his future hiring of staff to be linked to any actions or undertakings on his part. A protracted process ensued. Having reviewed the timeline of events, 3 things are clear to me. Following the Francis review, Parliamentary Service and the Labour Whips team have a duty of care to the people we engage to support us in Parliament. The focus of reforms in this area has been to intervene early, to prevent breakdowns in relationship, and to support both staff and MPs to be the best possible employers. Had the interventions not been made, I believe there could be the chance we would be facing very different accusations, and that could include negligence on behalf of staff. My second observation is that the process was quite a protracted one. While there were many reasons for that, I know this was the cause of some frustration for Gaurav, and I do believe it's something that we should seek to improve. All parties in Parliament have only recently been using these new tools in intervention, and we should seek ways to learn from them. My third observation is that I've seen nothing to substantiate the claims and allegations of mismanagement and bullying that have been made by Gaurav, and it would be unfair to frame genuine efforts around performance management in this way. While the concerns of staff have become obscured in recent days, they remain a concern for me, and that is why the team were working with Gaurav in the first place. Gaurav has a very different view of what are essentially, though, the same and agreed facts. In my view, that requires mediation rather than a determination. Caucus resolved today to do what any workplace would do under these circumstances, and that is to provide a mediation process for these issues to be resolved. That is, in my view, the most appropriate opportunity to raise any grievances on either side between Gaurav and the Labour Whips. We'll seek full agreement from all parties with that process before proceeding. Finally, I can vouch as someone who entered Parliament 14 years ago that this kind of support for new MPs has not been available in the way that it is now. But equally, the expectation of MPs has rightly shifted. In the past, bad behaviour has been tolerated or ignored. The Francis Review highlighted that. Labor committed to doing things differently after that report, and we have, and I'm proud of that. I expect our MPs to treat people well. From my perspective, the decisions taken today is our conclusion to this episode. We have said all we have to say and established a process to resolve past grievances while setting out a path for Gaurav to return to caucus should he wish to. While Gaurav may wish to continue relitigating what's occurred, mediation provides a process for him to do that doesn't compromise his staff or lead to further unsubstantiated allegations. There are very real issues facing New Zealanders right now. As government MPs, our full attention should be on responding to those rather than talking about ourselves. That is the very clear view of our caucus and the basis of the decisions today. I'm happy to take questions. Mikey.
Prime Minister, how frustrating was this for your party?
Oh, this is frustrating, but it's also disappointing. We're all here to do a job, to make a difference for our communities, to focus on the very real challenges that we face. What we don't want to see is MPs continually, instead of focusing on that, talking about themselves.
Leaving the door open, is that an acknowledgement that there was merit to some of the concerns he raised?
No, that's an acknowledgement that the caucus team see themselves as just that, a team. They are very hurt and upset by what has happened, but they are also a very forgiving group of people. They want to give the opportunity for their team member to form a path back, but they are also very clear the breaches here do constitute serious misconduct. If there are further breaches, they reserve the right to revisit the decision.
I'll
come here and then I'll come to you, Barry.
Was today's outcome predetermined at that secret meeting last night?
No. Look, happy to be very clear on that. One of the concerns raised by my team members was that, of course, caucus relies on the ability of people to speak freely and openly. One of the issues of misconduct was that, unfortunately, Gaurav had been sharing the contents of meetings publicly, and that meant people didn't feel they were able to raise questions, discuss issues with colleagues. To be very clear, when caucus members, team members came together, I made it very clear a formal caucus meeting must always be open to all caucus members. That meeting was not a formal meeting, and I was also clear we would not have any predetermined outcome. Natural justice is very important to our team.
Meeting last night.
Sorry?
Did you attend that?
I did indeed. I did indeed. And it was convened in response to concerns, as I imagine any leader of a team would, that people didn't feel they could speak openly because meeting content was being shared. They had questions and issues they wished to discuss, but we were clear that was not a meeting to predetermine the outcome. That would not be a fair process. Barry.
Was it a full caucus meeting last night?
No, there were some some who were absent, a small number. It wasn't a full meeting, a caucus meeting, Barry, because that would require everyone to be invited, and obviously one member was not. Also, the Labor Party was not present. As I say, it was an informal opportunity for issues of concerns to be raised in a safe space.
All the MPs were there?
No, not all of them, but again, it's not unusual for meetings, some not to be available. The meeting today had everyone who was in New Zealand and who would usually attend caucus. So usually, of course, we wouldn't have the speaker attend, and we had one member overseas, but otherwise full complement.
The allegations he's made, don't you think he should have been given due process and then be inquired into?
So, of course, part of our process includes having a full meeting, which the member is invited to attend in order to put their perspective. The time that we chose was based on his advice and when he was available. He knew the time before, if I might just, he was advised of the time because he helped select it before any other member of caucus was. He was then emailed, phoned, text messaged to try and seek for him to join this meeting. We saw it as an important part of the process. The second issue, my view here is that the facts here aren't in dispute. There's different interpretations around, in some cases, the way this issue has been managed. This is not an issue that requires a determination. It requires mediation, because that's what will take us forward.
Him not attending the meeting this afternoon, is this how he is learning of the outcome of him being suspended from caucus, or was he informed?
I would hope not. You'll know that we pushed this meeting time back. this event back. That was in an attempt to reach Gaurav. I've called, messaged, others have called. Unfortunately, I was unable to talk to him directly. It, of course, would be my preference that I would have been able to share the decision of his team members with him directly. He has not provided me with that opportunity. I hope this is not the first he's heard of it. We have made efforts to convey this information to him directly.
The mediation process.
And then I'll come over to you, Luke.
The mediation process, considering his behaviour in the last couple of days, I mean, how confident are you that he will actually take part in that?
Well, actually, my concern is probably based on what I've reviewed of engagement in any process since last year. We will, in good faith, though, seek to create a reasonable forum where all parties agree with the individuals involved in the process. So we'll do that in good faith, but it is fair to say it has been difficult to find consensus on how to manage issues all the way through. Yeah. Look.
When you asked him for what time would suit him for this meeting today, did he say at that point that he was going to attend?
Yeah, so I'm happy to. I thought this might be an area of interest, so I did ask the whips who directly engaged with him on that. Originally, a range of options were sent, and they didn't receive a response. They then proposed a time. They were told that no, at that time Gaurav had a specific event. They then advised that we would set the meeting time at a time that suited Gaurav today. He advised that nearer to 3 would suit. So Whip suggested 2:30. We then at that point didn't receive any further engagement.
And just on the meeting of MPs last night, was every other Labor MP invited to that except Gaurav?
Yes. I'm very clear on why. The reason we were having to have this meeting in the first place was because confidential conversations amongst MPs was being shared publicly. That's a clear breach of the rules and created an environment where MPs didn't feel that they could ask questions, raise concerns or talk to their colleagues. Usually it would have been possible for people to have those informal engagements here. In recess, it meant it wasn't possible. So that meeting was convened in order for them to do that in a safe space. Again, very clear, and the very two first things I said at that meeting, this does not constitute a formal caucus meeting. Secondly, we will not predetermine an outcome here. That is not a fair process of natural justice.
He's gone rogue?
Yeah, sorry, Luke, last.
Oh no, I mean, do you reckon he's gone rogue?
Look, that's not for me, given that I haven't been able to speak to him. I can't give you that clear view. But I am the leader of the Labor caucus. I expect reasonable engagement from our caucus members, particularly on an issue of this gravity. It is of note to me that there was only essentially one individual who was unable to make the meeting today. We had everyone else rearranged their diaries to make themselves available for what they considered to be a very important discussion. It is disappointing the member in question did not.
Is there any intention to refer the matter to the New Zealand Council of the Labour Party?
A good question. We have separate processes. So the caucus rules determine that caucus is able to make a decision on serious misconduct, and there are 2 areas of concern. The breach and confidentiality of caucus meetings, and the second is whether you bring the party into disrepute. Caucus on that basis can make those determinations and determine expulsion or any other remedy. The party, of course, we can refer matters to the party. We haven't done that at this stage, but that doesn't stop the party being able to make their own decisions as well. But this is a separate process. Yeah.
A range of penalties they
do.
impose, that can't they?
They do, many of which, of course, would relate to the ongoing ability of someone to, for instance, stand in the future as a candidate. But ultimately, we have a caucus responsibility also to determine what happens here within Parliament. And so we've done that, but we've stayed in very close touch with the party. Joe and then Jason, and then Jessica.
Did anyone inform Gaurav that the meeting was going to take place last night without him?
No, as I say, it wasn't a caucus meeting, and it was very much being held because people did not feel they could have an open conversation with him. I can't tell you whether he was aware that members had a conversation or an ability to ask questions without that being shared. He may well have been.
I see from his perspective the fact that he wasn't told that that meeting was going to happen, that he might have thought this is a predetermined decision. I take the point that you said that at the start. However, he wasn't invited to hear that.
But I'm sure he'll also appreciate that given the contents of meetings were being shared publicly, that was the reason that meeting was held in the first place. It was informal.
With how that might have made
I can sympathise with the Labour members who did not feel that they had a safe space to be able to ask questions and talk amongst themselves. Again, you have my assurance and word here. It would not have been keeping within the rules to make any predetermination, and we were very clear that we wouldn't, and we didn't.
Prime Minister,
Jason.
He's shared what he's saying are screenshots from that meeting. Screenshots.
I know what the image is, and I also know what it is of. It was one individual was speaking. You'd note that probably if someone were deliberately sharing a message, it would be more likely a gallery view. I also knew who took that screenshot. It was intended they were trying to capture something else on their phone. The meeting was occurring in the corner at the same time, and they inadvertently sent it to someone they shouldn't.
So somebody accidentally sent him
Yes.
that screenshot of that meeting?
No, what they sent was a screenshot of the conversation trying to set a caucus meeting time. It just so happened that they were multitasking, the meeting was underway. I'm not going to give the names, as you can imagine, they're somewhat embarrassed over the situation. But I think the most important thing is that no one deliberately was trying to undermine, again, what we were trying to protect, which is the ability of caucus to talk amongst themselves. And I would reflect that many of you would probably find it very difficult to work in a workplace where you don't have trust and confidence in your team. That's essentially what we've been trying to manage here in a fair... Last one, Jason, and then Jessica, and then Amelia.
Are you able to walk us through why the decision was made for suspension rather than expulsion?
A good question. There were grounds for expulsion because the caucus rules are very clear on what constitutes serious misconduct. But the team wanted to send a message that whilst they considered this to be very egregious and very serious, and that their trust has been lost, they are a team who wants to give second chances. So this is a message to Gaurav that he is still a Labour member of the team, but we have expectations that he follows the same rules as everyone else. And if he does that, there's a pathway back. If he doesn't, he will be expelled. Jessica.
How's this a second chance, though? A second chance perhaps would have come on Saturday. Every day he has spoken out in a calculated way against the party. What do you think that sends, what message does that send to your team?
Yeah, so look, this is a decision by the team, and so I think that's a really important point to make. It is I support the decision that's being made collectively here, because essentially what we have here is the same effect as expulsion in some ways. He's excluded from the environment where there's that lack of trust. He cannot participate in caucus meetings. That gives an opportunity and a time frame to build back. If he's unable to, then that will result in expulsion.
Should you have taken a harder line with him on Thursday when this first came up instead of taking a softly approach?
No, so in between, of course on Thursday we had the first op-ed. Attempts were made to convey the serious nature of that and to engage, and a reminder over the course of the coming days was made that an ongoing breach of the caucus rules would constitute serious misconduct. But we see this as a very clear direction now from the caucus around our expectations, and if those expectations aren't met, no one can dispute that the member has not been told and that we have not been clear on our expectations.
Just on the
Amelia.
Trust in your colleagues, did you get to the bottom of whether the screenshots that Dr. Sharma shared had been, they'd gotten consent from the people who'd sent in for him to post them?
No, I can shed no further light on that because we've not tried to identify the individual, and you can see why. They were obviously shared in confidence with Gaurav, and so we didn't believe that it would be in that individual's best interest to find out or try and inquire as to who it is. So no, I can shed no further light on that other than a grave concern amongst the team that you should be able to talk to your colleagues without having your messages shared, and I cannot advise you whether permission was granted, but to be honest, I doubt it.
The contents of those messages concern you, though?
Without context, it's very hard for me to give you an answer to that. Well, again, it's very important for me not to breach anyone's privacy. I would hope that we create an environment where people are able to come forward and share concerns, but I would never want a set of circumstances without someone's permission having their messages sent in that way.
Are you worried about
I'll come here
the,
and then go. Yeah.
are you worried about the optics of this, in that you've had a member of your caucus make a complaint about bullying and they've been punished and kicked out of their caucus?
Well, of course, coming back to the issue, the reason that they made those claims is because their staff had claimed that they were being treated poorly. And an intervention was rightly made to try and correct that situation. Then, what essentially has been performance management has been turned into accusations of bullying. I've seen nothing to substantiate that, but I come back to the core reason we're here. Staff, multiple, made complaints about their management. We had a duty of care to intervene, and I believe that has happened appropriately.
And Dr. Sharma,
So I'm aware of the optics of us not doing anything.
Prime Minister, then, can I just get clarification then? It will be before or by the end of December?
We've just, good question.
Reinstated or expelled?
So we're revisiting in December. We've not predetermined that means it would be a re-entry or an expulsion. It depends on the events leading up to, but we've said December, so we haven't put a specific date.
One or the other, he's either in or he's out.
Well, no, he could remain suspended. We haven't taken that off the table. All options are open for the caucus to consider. Audrey.
When you're talking about expulsion as an option, are you talking about just sort of permanent expulsion from the caucus but remaining an MP, or the letter to the Speaker and him leaving Parliament?
Nothing further than expulsion from the party, but only because nothing further has been discussed. Thomas, sorry.
Would you consider that your colleagues have been defamed by Dr. Sharma, and if so, would you support them taking legal action to stop him from continuing to defame them?
Yes, well, look, all I can say is, as I've been very clear, I've seen nothing to substantiate the allegations. In fact, on at least one of the allegations, they were looked into and found to have no basis, and he's continued to make them. That is why, in my firm view, it's mediation, not a determination that is required, because I see no threshold for anything further being met there.
You probably wouldn't like them to take this further and take an action against Dr. Sharma.
I am concerned that claims are being made that cannot be substantiated because there are other people's reputations involved here. I'm equally concerned that staff members are being implicated by the level of detail that's being shared, and that's been a concern of us. We considered whether or not, for transparency, we should release some of the communications to demonstrate our perspective on what has occurred here. But again, that runs the risk of exposing staff. So I am concerned about all parties. That's why, in my view, we do need to find a way to bring this back to the most appropriate pace for these issues to be resolved, and that is not in this fora.
Would he need to apologise and sort of withdraw those claims for him to be welcomed back into the caucus?
We haven't been that specific on expectations. The expectations are that essentially he abide by the caucus rules, that he follows the same directions all MPs are required to in fulfilling House duty and all those other guidelines, that the caucus rules are followed in public communication. In the same way all MPs are expected to do. It's a restating of what should be the obvious. We have also set an expectation that there would be some attempt to resolve the situation through mediation.
And if you were welcomed back into your caucus, would you expect to see him stand in the next election, or is his political career over now, regardless of whether he comes back into
Those would be
those
would, to be fair. So our decisions all relate to his membership of our caucus. The only point where that would be, where we would essentially be having a wider impact on his role as a Labour MP would be his expulsion from the Labour caucus. Otherwise, those decisions sit with the party.
As the leader of that party, would you expect to see him?
If he were expelled from the caucus, then yes.
If he came back into caucus, though, do you think he could possibly stand again?
That would be, at that point, that becomes a decision for the party. Yeah.
Even if he remains an electorate MP, what are you going to do about the staff?
And so, look, to be clear, when those issues have arisen, we've sought to intervene. Those, in some cases, have been on exit, though. So the issue had been, of course, making sure that future hires were coming into an environment that was a good working environment.
So, sorry, just to sort of work through that, he has had staff exit, there's been a hiring freeze, so basically Parliamentary Service is now in a position where they're having to hire new staff.
Actually, my understanding, Joe, is that resolution had been found actually on Wednesday of last week around these issues, and so I'll leave those where they they lie, but resolution had been found on Wednesday of last week around these issues. Unfortunately, they have since been aired. But as I understand, all parties have stuck with that resolution around future hiring.
Lastly, can I also ask if in the
to
course of any of the meetings that have gone on, have you had any concerns raised by any other MPs about Karen McAnulty?
No.
Can I ask,
Ben.
from your opening press conference last week on the Friday, you spoke of the need to support Gaurav as well, who's obviously going through a pretty tough time. He's made that clear in some of his Facebook posts. Are you confident that he's getting this support?
A good question. We've tried to do what we can, and that, as much as we keep the conversations in detail within caucus meetings confidential, that has been one of the things that members have wanted to be mindful of, but we've tried to do what we can. That does rely, though, on people's calls being answered, messages being answered, but we have tried to ensure that there's always support.
So I'll ask as well, just with the vagaries of New Zealand electoral law, if he chooses to leave the Labour Party after this announcement or sanctions or whatever, does he need to resign his seat? Does that create a by-election?
No, there are other avenues there that would determine. It gets a bit more complicated at that point, and I'm loath to speak to them because we have not discussed any of those further than the decision on suspension, the prospect of expulsion if there is further breaches. Beyond that, we have not had further discussions, and some of it would relate to the party decision-making too.
Are you worried about
Is
it fair to say you'd like to avoid a by-election if possible?
I think, at all times it's good to try and avoid those, but we won't make decisions based on that. We'll make decisions on what we think is in the best interest of the party and the parliament, and be able to do what all MPs are here to do, and that's our job. Jason?
Are you worried that he's got a trove of other information, texts, maybe even voice memos and recordings and whatnot that we've seen from other parties, and that now he's been suspended, he's going to release all of that and do the nuclear option?
Look, well, first of all, I've been through, a lot of the engagement over these issues. And as I've said, we did consider whether or not there would be some value in that being available, but we need to protect the privacy of what often is identifiable staff members. So that's the first thing. Just more broadly, I'd just say, look, we've made the decision here today to suspend. There is a pathway back, but that will come down to the decisions of Gaurav. Yes, forgive me.
Yes. Just on the support that you've offered Gaurav, he's mentioned that prior to today you've only sent him one text. Is he wrong?
Prior to today. So I went back through actually, because one of the reasons I went back through is because, of course, I wanted to double check that I did not recall him ever raising these issues with me, and I can confirm I hadn't. I have not gone through everything, but from what I can see, he is a member who I've had less engagement with than most. That is fair to say. Most of the MPs in our team I will have, engagement with sporadically, either events, text messages, meetings. He happens to be one which I've had very little.
Yeah, sorry, just to follow up, the query was around this period where he's raised his concerns.
Well, actually, yes, that is of concern to me because, firstly, as I've already said, he's never raised the issue directly with me, and that is an expectation I would have because it's set out in our rules. First, if there's an issue, you go to the whips. If you're unable to get resolution, you go to either the Labour leader or someone that the Labour leader nominates. And if it's still unresolved, you go to caucus. That didn't happen. He didn't raise these issues directly with me. He did raise them with my Chief of Staff at the end of last year. My Chief of Staff told me about that, and he also told me the resolution that was reached between them. And I've seen the messages that demonstrate that. Neither of us heard anything after that until the week that this turned into this.
What I would like to clarify is Gaurav claims that you only sent him one text following his column, i.e. to check on him to see what the situation was.
Correct. No,
how does that fit
I'm
with
happy
you
to
saying...
share everything that I've done. I called him. He did not answer my call. So I sent a message that essentially said, I'm not calling to relitigate these issues. I'm calling to check your welfare. I received one message in response. I won't go into the details of that, but it was essentially setting out his perspective on issues. Beyond that, I have sought others to engage. To be fair, I think there's an environment right now that no one feels that any engagement they have is between the two of us. And of course, subsequent to the meeting today, I have reached out, I tried to call, and I have sent messages. Those have gone unresponded to.
Could the caucus make a decision about his future sooner than December if he continued to post allegations
Yes.
on social media
Yes.
and...
The resolution was clear that they reserve the right to revisit at any time, and including any breaches of the caucus rules. Yeah.
Basically, an expulsion hangs over his head if he were to take to Facebook.
Well, actually, that happens for every caucus member at any time knows that the rules are that A, confidentiality, B, the party into disrepute. So that actually sits with us all at all times. This is essentially a restatement of our existing rules.
This is final warning, though.
Yes. Yeah.
So
okay, I might just conclude here. Yeah.
Can we just clarify the expulsion question?
Yep.
If he's expelled from the caucus, would you expect the council to then expel him from the party?
Oh, look, again, I'm very clear on the council's role here, and I won't remove their elected responsibilities. Obviously, if the caucus makes a decision to expel, he's no longer in Parliament as a Labour MP, and I imagine that they would then reflect that. But again, that's ultimately for the council. Thanks, everyone.